Good day. Have you noticed that sometimes when things are seeming very confused, there comes a moment when the confusion lifts and there is clarity? Perhaps a message appears. It is as if the fog clears and light shines through and meaning is found. Well, many years ago, when I was very early in my priestly journey, I was having a discussion with a very erudite colleague of mine. And I referred to the Samaritan woman at the well, from whom Jesus asked for water, as the Syrophoenician woman. My colleague looked at me rather bewildered and said, I think you're confusing two stories. Well, I blushed with embarrassment as I realised I had muddled up the two stories. But in doing so, it gave me some further clarity to Jesus' response to those on the margins, especially to women. For no one was beyond his attention and help, regardless of race or gender. I have to confess that I really like and admire the Syrophoenician woman who we hear about today. She was really gutsy. She was not put off by initially being rebuffed. She, like any mother, wanted to help her child. In fact, she wanted the best possible healer. And she had heard about Jesus. And she wanted, as we all do, the best for her child. Her child, we presume, was suffering from epilepsy, which at the time was a very confusing condition. And people could only think of it as being a possession by an evil spirit, a demon. Fortunately, nowadays, the condition is much better understood. But there is still some stigma around what can be a very debilitating condition. But in this story, we see a very brave woman, and we know that the position of women at that time and in that culture was subservient, and she was a Gentile woman, so even more to be shunned and excluded. Jesus' sharp response to the woman asked the question of who food should be given to. To children, by which he meant the children of Israel, rather than dogs, where he was actually referring to Gentiles. Gentiles as dogs? That certainly does not appear to be Christ-like. The mother, with great determination, doesn't give up. She understands just what Jesus is saying and challenges. She comes back with that amazing response. Even dogs under the table have crumbs. I've always thought that perhaps at this point, a smile comes across Jesus' face. Maybe even a smile of appreciation. That this woman was prepared to face ridicule for her child, for fight for healing from this man that she had heard so much about. She was a woman who recognised and had faith in Jesus' power and authority, and that he was a man of God for all. We may wonder why Jesus reacted initially in this way. It seemed rather callous. It is confusing. But as the confusion lifts, there is clarity in his actions. Jesus is emphasising that his is an inclusive message, that he is ready and willing and open to all. Many of you, no doubt, were fixed on the Olympics. But have you been so cheered by the medal hall of the Paralympics? I have to say, I have enjoyed waking up to listen to the news and to hear of yet more medals. Many of them gold, being won by our Paralympians. Through the rest of the very distressing news about the traumas and horrors of Afghanistan, the cyclone destroying much of Haiti, it has been cheering to hear of the success of not only our Paralympians, but those from many other countries as well, who have overcome enormous challenges to reach their goal of entering the Olympic challenge. I have to say, I felt a real joy of seeing the athlete from Afghanistan taking part in the long jump. A real case of the taking part is more important than just the winning. I may, of course, have a special reason for feeling proud and cheered by these Paralympics, especially that we are seeing increasing amounts of coverage of their stories and their achievements. For most of my previous working life, I taught young people with learning difficulties and disabilities, many of whom strove hard for acceptance, for inclusion in most things in their lives. At times it was a struggle to get people to see what they could achieve and their real worth to society. I am greatly warmed by the fact that things are improving for people with disabilities and difficulties. It's taken a long time for this to happen, for society, secular society, to accept that we all, regardless of abilities, have a part to play on the world stage. But now, do we just sit back and accept that things are better? I don't think so. We as Christians should be at the forefront of acceptance for all in all fields of life. We need to challenge ourselves and see where we are failing. It is not just in respect of disability, but in all areas where we see prejudice and exclusion because of race, gender, sexuality, or belief systems. God has set us the example to value all, to accept all. Christ challenges us again through this encounter with the Syrophoenician woman and with the Samaritan woman at the well, to remember he is for all, open to all, available to all. We don't just have his love. It's available for all, regardless. It has no boundaries. The mother stood up for the right of her child to be healed, to receive Christ's blessing. We too, as Christians, are called to stand up for those in need, without any partiality, as St. James in the epistle for today writes. But if you show partiality, you commit sin and are convicted by the law as transgressor. We need to reflect on how the church shows partiality. How do we in our daily lives show partiality? There is great confusion in our church life and our personal life. What we need is to move from confusion to clarity. And Christ shows us the way in his acceptance of the woman and healing of her child, and in the healing of all the other people, particularly those on the margins, regardless of who they were or where they came from. His commandment to love God and our neighbour as ourselves clears the fog of our prejudices and encourages us to see clearly the path of love and acceptance for all. Amen.